In the high-stakes theater of modern geopolitics, a radical shift is currently unfolding, one that few analysts could have predicted even 12 months ago. Picture this scenario. A drone the size of a standard lawnmower, costing less than $1,200 to assemble, streaks through the hazy skies over the Persian Gulf and successfully destroys a high-tech weapon system that costs $13.5 million. This is not a sequence from a high-budget science fiction film, nor is it a theoretical exercise conducted in a military laboratory. It is the reality of the battlefield today. But perhaps the most shocking element of this development is the identity of the nation providing this revolutionary technology. It is not the United States, nor is it a regional Gulf power with a defense budget measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars. The country responsible for this asymmetric disruption is Ukraine. After fighting for its very survival for more than 4 years against a full-scale invasion, Ukraine has emerged not just as a resilient defender, but as a global exporter of security innovation. Until very recently, no nation in the Middle East was looking to Kiev for military advice or defense partnerships. That has all changed in what is arguably the most unexpected geopolitical pivot of the current decade. Ukraine has transformed into the go-to partner for Gulf nations in their most desperate hour. In doing so, it is rewriting the long-established rules of modern warfare, simultaneously humiliating the military reputations of both Russia and Iran, and positioning itself as a global power player that absolutely nobody saw coming. Welcome to World Brief Daily. If you have not subscribed to our channel yet, we urge you to hit that button right now, because the story we are covering today is the kind that fundamentally alters your understanding of how the world works. We are going to cover every facet of this shifting landscape: the critical Strait of Hormuz crisis, the technical breakdown of how Ukraine cracked the Russian Black Sea blockade, the reasons why wealthy Gulf states are now abandoning sophisticated Patriot missiles in favor of $2,500 Ukrainian drones, and the massive 10-year defense deals that could permanently transform the future of the Ukrainian state. This is a comprehensive deep dive into the new architecture of global security, and you are going to want to stay for every second of it. To understand why Ukraine is now the most sought-after drone partner on the planet, we must first look at the beginning of this evolution. Most observers in the West have yet to fully grasp a fundamental truth. Ukraine has seen all of this before. The maritime blockades, the relentless drone swarms, the asymmetric tactics designed to strangle a nation's economy without ever committing to a conventional, large-scale naval battle. These are all challenges Ukraine has already mastered. Russia utilized these very tactics against Ukraine, and now, in a mirrored scenario, Iran is deploying them in the Persian Gulf. Ukraine's foreign minister, Andriy Sybiha, stated the situation plainly on the social media platform X on March 21st. He described the current events in the Strait of Hormuz as painfully familiar, noting that Russia followed the exact same playbook in the Black Sea, blocking vital maritime trade routes to suffocate Ukraine's economy and achieve its political and military objectives. His assessment is backed by a grim backstory. When Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion in February 22, one of his primary strategic goals was to seal off Ukraine's Black Sea ports. As the recognized breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine shipped massive quantities of grain to buyers across Asia and Africa. By blockading these ports, Russia was not just conducting a military maneuver, it was attempting to economically liquidate the Ukrainian state, cutting off its primary revenue streams and forcing it to accept Moscow's terms. That blockade resulted in an estimated loss of $20 billion in annual revenue for Ukraine. $20 billion vanished almost overnight. However, Ukraine did not collapse under the weight of this economic warfare. Instead, it innovated. How Ukraine fought back is the specific blueprint that every Gulf military commander and every defense minister from Riyadh to Doha is now desperate to acquire. The Ukrainian counter-strategy in the Black Sea was built upon two distinct yet integrated pillars: offense and defense, layered into a doctrine that conventional naval theory had never anticipated. On the offensive front, Ukraine began targeting Russia's Black Sea fleet with precision. While ballistic missiles like the Storm Shadow were effective, the true game-changer was the development of naval drones, specifically unmanned surface vessels, or USVs. Systems like the Magura and the Sea Baby became household names in military circles. These are autonomous drone boats guided from hundreds of miles away, packed with high explosives, and steered directly into the hulls of Russian warships. Russia's admirals, trained in traditional naval combat, simply had no effective answer for these low-profile, high-speed threats. As reported by Politico, these drones did not remain static, they evolved rapidly. Variants were developed that could carry anti-aircraft missiles and even smaller FPV drones, acting as motherships for further tactical expansion. Ukraine was innovating at a pace far exceeding Russia's ability to adapt. The result of this technological surge was devastating for the Kremlin. The Black Sea Fleet, which had been one of Putin's most prized geopolitical assets, was reduced in size by approximately one-third. Warships that once patrolled the sea with impunity were forced to retreat, first from positions near the Ukrainian coast and eventually from their historic bases in occupied Crimea. Today, as Politico confirms, Ukraine's ports in Odessa are receiving around 200 cargo ships every month. The blockade has been neutralized. A nation with no traditional blue water navy defeated a nuclear power's fleet through innovation and sheer determination. This is the blueprint the Gulf states now require for their own survival. To understand the urgency, we must look at the current state of the Strait of Hormuz, where the scale of the crisis is genuinely staggering. On February 28, 26, a joint United States and Israeli military operation, designated Operation Epic Fury, launched a series of strikes against Iranian targets. These strikes resulted in the death of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and several high-ranking military commanders. Iran's retaliation was immediate, massive, and targeted the global energy jugular. According to the GCC Secretary General, more than 5,000 Iranian projectiles, including missiles, drones, and fast attack boat operations, were launched at Gulf states within the first month alone. Saudi Arabia has absorbed the heaviest portion of this bombardment. Most critically, Iran effectively sealed the Strait of Hormuz. This 20-mile-wide choke point, through which 20% of the world's total oil and liquid natural gas supply passes every single day, was shut down. Data from the House of Saud indicates that tanker traffic through the strait collapsed by 94.6%. This was not a mere slowdown. It was a total systemic failure. In a comparable 3-week period in 25, 2,652 tankers transited the strait. In 26, that number dropped to a mere 142. By March 28, Brent crude oil prices had surged to $112.57 per barrel, representing a 51% monthly gain. At one point, NBC News reported that prices touched $119, a level of volatility not seen since the peak of the COVID-19 supply chain crisis. The economic shockwaves were felt instantly across the globe. The BBC reports that roughly 90% of the energy passing through the strait is destined for Asian markets. In China, despite having 3 months of strategic reserves, citizens are already facing fuel price hikes of 20%. In the Philippines, a national energy emergency has been declared as daily wages plummet against rising fuel costs. India is facing a particularly acute crisis, with 400,000 workers in the ceramics industry facing layoffs as the natural gas supply simply evaporated. Al Jazeera reports that Capital Economics is forecasting GDP losses of between 10 and 15% for the Gulf states if this conflict persists for just 3 months. For nations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, this is not just a regional conflict. It is an existential threat to their modern economies. According to Wet News, these states lost 1% of their total GDP within the first month of the conflict alone. As The Guardian describes it, this is the ultimate nightmare scenario. They did not initiate the conflict, but they are the ones paying the highest price as the strait remains blocked. They needed a solution that worked immediately, and that is why they reached out to Ukraine. Before we continue with the details of these extraordinary defense agreements, we want to pause for a brief message from the sponsor of today's video. And now, we return to one of the most remarkable geopolitical pivots in modern history. When President Volodymyr Zelensky concluded his high-profile tour of the Gulf at the end of March 26, visiting Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Jordan, he did not just return with diplomatic platitudes. He secured a suite of 10-year defense agreements with some of the wealthiest nations on the planet, nations that had never before engaged with Ukraine on this level of strategic depth. Zelensky told reporters on March 30th that these agreements are extremely important, noting that Ukraine has never had such formalized, long-term security arrangements with this region in its history. The Kyiv Independent reports that the formal defense memorandum with Saudi Arabia was signed in Jeddah by Saudi Assistant Minister of Defense Khalid al-Bayari. and Ukrainian Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Andriy Hanatov. The agreements are comprehensive, focusing on air defenses, naval drones, electronic warfare, and sophisticated software, the exact toolkit Ukraine developed to survive the Russian onslaught. Zelensky confirmed via WhatsApp that these deals are not just about interceptors, but include defense lines, software, and electronic warfare systems, describing it as a systemic approach to regional security. Reporting from Defense News indicates that these multi-billion-dollar agreements are structured as 10-year partnerships, featuring provisions for joint weapons production. This means establishing manufacturing lines for Ukrainian-designed naval drones and interceptor systems, both within Ukraine and inside the partner countries. This is far more than a simple arms sale. It is the integration of Ukraine into the permanent security architecture of the Gulf for the next decade. The financial terms are equally transformative. The Guardian reports that Gulf nations are partially paying for these technologies and energy supplies, providing a vital lifeline to a Ukrainian economy squeezed by years of war. Alexander Kara, of the Ukrainian PRISM Foreign Policy Council, stated to Ukrinform that Ukraine's combat experience is a commodity that can be traded for security and a stronger negotiating position, proving that Ukraine is a more valuable partner than Russia. This brings us to the core of the issue, the drone connection. To understand why this matters, one must look at the supply chain that links these players. Iran provided Russia with the weapons that have tormented Ukrainian cities for years, and now, Ukraine is providing the countermeasures to the very nations Iran is attacking. According to The Conversation, Russia is now capable of producing approximately 1,000 long-range drones every single day, most of which are based on Iranian Shahed designs. Iran did not just provide blueprints, it provided the industrial expertise to scale production. This partnership has cost Ukraine dearly. In February 26 alone, Russia launched over 5,000 drones against Ukrainian targets, a 13% increase over the previous month. In a single 24-hour surge in late March, nearly 1,000 drones were launched. However, the Wall Street Journal reports that the flow of hardware is now bi-directional, with Russia supplying Iran with Garan-2 and Shahed 136 drones in return for previous support. This is the hardware pipeline behind the strikes on Saudi cities and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Ukraine knows these drones better than any military on Earth. It has absorbed more than 57,000 Shahed-type attacks since 2022, tracking every iteration and every attempt by Russia to harden them against electronic warfare. The Foreign Policy Research Institute notes that Ukraine has spent 4 years building countermeasures that evolve as fast as the threats. This expertise is what the Gulf states are buying, and the cost difference is staggering. Gulf states expended over 800 Patriot interceptors in just the first 3 days of the conflict. A single Patriot missile cost $13.5 million. Lockheed Martin only produced 600 of these interceptors in the entirety of 25. The Gulf burned through an entire year of global production in less than a week. This is an unsustainable economic catastrophe, which is exactly what Iran intended. Ukraine's answer is an interceptor drone known as the Sting, which costs a mere $1,500. Confirmed by Defense News as a primary export product, the Sting system has already demonstrated its effectiveness, taking out 70% of Shahed drones launched at Kyiv in February. According to Drone XL, Ukraine has already deployed more than 200 counter-drone specialists to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan to train local forces and embed Ukrainian institutional knowledge. Even the Pentagon has taken notice, with reports suggesting U.S. defense officials are in talks to purchase Ukrainian interceptor technology, a remarkable reversal where the supposed underdog is supplying the world's most powerful military. As we watch this story unfold, remember to stay subscribed to World Brief Daily for the latest updates. There is a layer of strategic brilliance here that transcends simple business. Zelensky is building a diversified support base of wealthy, pragmatic allies who are not subject to the same political shifts seen in the West. While U.S. and European commitment can fluctuate with election cycles, the Gulf states prioritize results and long-term stability. By positioning itself for joint production and securing Gulf investment for reconstruction, Ukraine is ensuring its survival long after the current hot phase of the war concludes. The irony is profound. Iran armed Russia to attack Ukraine, and now Ukraine is arming the Gulf to neutralize Iran. For Russia, this is a deepening diplomatic disaster. Putin has spent decades cultivating influence in the Middle East, only to see it evaporate as his alliance with Iran alienates the rest of the region. Nations that once saw Moscow as the only power in the post-Soviet space are now looking to Kyiv. Even as the UAE maintains commercial ties with Russia, such as the Rosatom and DP World Logistics venture, they are simultaneously signing defense pacts with Ukraine. This multi-alignment is a reality Ukraine accepts because it serves the immediate goal of national defense. Iran's diplomatic protest at the United Nations, accusing Ukraine of complicity in military aggression, only confirms their fear of Ukrainian expertise. This is not just about the current crisis, it is about the next decade. Ukraine is exporting an entire ecosystem of wartime innovation, processes and technical knowledge that cannot be replicated by peacetime industries. As the EU's Luigi Di Maio suggested, Ukraine's Black Sea shipping model is now being studied as a framework for the Strait of Hormuz itself. While the crisis in the Gulf remains dire, with oil prices high and the strait still blocked, Ukraine has provided a tangible path forward. A small, battle-hardened nation has proven that it can defeat $13.5 million problems with $1,500 solutions. Ukraine has emerged as a global power in the domain of innovation and adaptive warfare, turning the weapons of its enemies into the foundations of its new international influence. The underdog is not just surviving, it is leading. We will continue to track the shipment of drones, the finalization of these historic deals, and the evolving role of Ukraine in the world's most critical waterways. Thank you for joining us on World Brief Daily. If you found this analysis valuable, please share it and stay tuned for more.